My ex-boyfriend Eric started reading about the Backrooms a couple of months ago, and at first, it was just a stupid internet rumor that people posted on forums late at night. Everything changed when his simple curiosity turned into an intense obsession over just a few short weeks. He stopped laughing about the stories and spent hours reading forum posts written by people who claimed they slipped through walls in real life. He completely abandoned his normal life and stopped going to his job at the local warehouse. He bought 3 massive notebooks and filled every single page with detailed blueprints of floor plans, repeating that he was going to find a physical doorway into those yellow rooms. I spent countless nights trying to convince him to go outside or talk to a professional, but he completely pushed me away and locked himself inside his dark, silent apartment. 2 months later, his apartment looked like an absolute disaster zone that smelled strongly of rotting food and old trash. Black garbage bags were piled high against the hallway walls, while he sat motionless in the dark with thick black plastic taped over every single window frame. He was sitting inches away from his computer monitor, his face lit up by a harsh blue light that made him look completely ghostly. The living room furniture was shoved into bizarre angles, with chairs facing directly into the blank corners of the room. I reached down to grab one of the leaking trash bags, but he suddenly lunged out of his chair and yanked it out of my hands.
"Leave my stuff alone. You are ruining the alignment of the room."
Eric, look at yourself. This place is filthy and you look like you are starving.
You do not understand anything. I am finally close to making this work.
You are losing your mind, and I am calling your sister right now to come help you.
Do not touch that phone, or I swear I will throw you out into the street myself.
I walked out of his apartment in tears and refused to speak to him for almost a week. Then, on Saturday morning, he called me with a voice that sounded surprisingly calm, sweet, and completely normal for the first time in months. He apologized for screaming at me and asked me over because he had a special surprise to make things right. I stood outside his apartment door on the 2nd floor, feeling a terrible drop in my chest while the hallway stayed dead silent. The heavy lock clicked open with a sharp metallic bang, and the door swung inward very slowly to reveal Eric, looking absolutely horrifying with sunken, bloodshot eyes. Hundreds of papers were pinned to the walls, covered in crazy calculations and messy Eric drawings of yellow, endless corridors. Panic rushed through my body, and I instinctively stepped backward, but his cold hand shot out and clamped onto my wrist like a metal lock.
Eric, what is this? Why did you nail cardboard over all the windows again?
I finally figured out the secret. I found the exact spot where the floor gives way.
You lied to me on the phone. Let go of my arm right now. You are hurting me.
You stayed with me through all of me going crazy, so you deserve to go first. It is my gift to you.
I tried to pull my arm back, but he squeezed my wrist so hard that pain shot straight up into my shoulder joints. He stepped directly into my path to block the exit, and I started screaming for help at the top of my lungs. He dragged me across the living room carpet while I kicked frantically at his shins and tried to wrench my arm out of his tight grip. He yanked open the wooden door that led down to the cellar, slamming his elbow into my upper back and sending me tumbling down the hard wooden steps into the darkness below. My knees smashed into the edge of the stairs, and the door above me slammed shut as I heard the key turn inside the lock.
Eric, open this door right now. Please do not leave me down here in the dark.
Stop fighting it. Just step onto the gray tile in the middle of the room and you will see.
I flipped it, and a tiny bare bulb flickered on, casting a dim yellowish glow across the cluttered basement floor. In the center of the concrete, a square section had been chopped away to expose a smooth, lifeless gray tile that looked completely wrong and unnatural. A set of chalk arrows on the floor pointed straight toward that tile, but I stayed as far away from it as possible while searching for an exit. I spotted a tiny basement window near the top of the foundation wall, high above my reach. I dragged 2 heavy wooden storage boxes across the room, stacking them beneath the glass, I picked up an old broom from the corner and smashed the handle through the small glass window, sending sharp shards dropping into the dirt outside. I cleared the frame with a wooden stick, pulled my body up through the narrow opening, and scraped my skin raw against the concrete until I fell onto the alley floor outside. I ran down the dark alleyway as fast as my battered legs could carry me, jumping into my car and driving, and I blocked his phone number. 3 weeks passed before I slowly tried to force myself back into a normal routine. One afternoon, while walking down the street to buy groceries, I froze in my tracks when I saw a missing person poster on a telephone pole with a photo of Eric, stating that he had not been seen by anyone for over 20 days. I felt sick to my gut as I read the phone number printed at the bottom of the poster, realizing that the police had already been searching for him while I was hiding in fear. I called his sister, Sarah, and met her at a small cafe near the central police station so she could show me security footage from the camera mounted outside Eric's apartment building. On the morning right after I escaped, Eric appeared on screen at 10 in the morning, unlocked the front door, stepped inside the building, and closed the door firmly behind himself. The clock in the corner of the video screen fast-forwarded through 3 full days, but nobody else entered through that front door, and nobody left through the back exit. Sarah paused the video with tears streaming down her face and explained what the police found when they broke down the door 4 days later. The police broke down his door 4 days later, and the whole place was completely empty.
Did they check the basement? Did they check under the floors?
They checked every inch, but the front door was dead-bolted from the inside, and the windows were still nailed shut.
That makes no sense, Sarah. A full-grown man cannot just vanish out of a locked room.
His phone, wallet, and house keys were sitting right on the kitchen table, but he was just gone.
He had walked into his apartment, locked the heavy deadbolt from the inside, and completely vanished from existence without leaving any signs of a struggle. The police officially closed the investigation after 2 months because they ran out of leads, leaving his family with no answers. I keep thinking Eric was completely out of his mind, but I still cannot explain how he vanished from a locked room without a single trace. Deep down, the whole Backrooms theory sounds completely absurd and illogical to me, but what if he was actually right? What if he really found a way in?
You know that feeling when your brain completely refuses to turn off, no matter how exhausted you are? My sleep schedule was totally broken, so I took an extremely heavy prescription sleeping pill to finally knock myself out. I laid down on my bed and waited for the medicine to work. The drug hit me fast, making my limbs numb as a terrifying feeling of falling backward pulled me into complete darkness. When I opened my eyes, my bedroom was gone, and I was lying on a freezing, slimy concrete floor that smelled of sewage. A flickering green light cast long, ugly shadows against the damp brick walls of an endless underground tunnel. My clothes were soaked in foul water, and my head was pounding with a dull rhythm that made me sick. I pushed myself up against the slick wall, terrified as I realized I had no idea how to get back home. I kept moving through the dark passage, keeping my hand pressed against the dirty bricks for balance. Every 100 feet I passed the exact same cluster of rusted iron pipes and the exact same mold pattern on the wall. The silence was broken when a tiny gray rat scrambled out from a gap in the brickwork and ran across my feet. I kept walking, but my stomach dropped when the exact same rat with a missing patch of fur on its tail repeated the exact same movement a few yards later. I panicked and started sprinting as fast as I could down the endless corridor. Every single time I passed a light fixture, that identical rat repeated its exact movement across the floor. I slammed my fist into the brick wall in frustration, feeling a sharp pain shoot all the way up my shoulder joint. The physical pain proved I was awake, which made this impossible loop 1,000 times more terrifying. The solitary rat was quickly replaced by swarms of them, pouring out from every single crack in the walls. They rushed past my feet in a frenzy, fleeing from a foul stench of rotting meat that suddenly filled the narrow space. Through the frantic squeaks of the rodents, a much heavier sound echoed from the dark turn ahead, sounding like thick metal blades dragging across the floor. I scrambled behind a pile of broken construction debris, pulling my knees tight against my chest so nothing could spot me. The heavy scraping noise dragged past the tunnel entrance, accompanied by a wet, rattling breath that made my blood run cold. I pressed my back hard against the concrete and squeezed my eyes shut, refusing to peek into the shadows. The sound lingered near my hiding spot for an eternity, sniffing the air with loud, wet snorts before finally dragging itself away into the dark, lower tunnels. My throat was so dry that breathing actually hurt, so I eventually drank dark, murky fluid dripping from a rusted valve just to stop the burning. The tunnel ahead lost all light, forcing me to navigate through complete blackness while soft, heavy footsteps followed me from far behind. A loud metallic crash echoed directly behind my back, sounding like an iron beam falling onto the hard concrete surface. I scrambled wildly along the wall until my fingers found a small recessed doorway where I could squeeze my body inside. The overwhelming smell of rot filled the doorway as whatever was trailing me stopped right in front of where I was standing. I could feel a faint draft of hot air hitting my face every time I took a ragged breath in the complete dark. I bit down on my lips so hard that I tasted warm blood, waiting until the footsteps finally moved off into the freezing distance. I shuffled forward until the walls shifted to smooth gray concrete, and an electrical hum buzzed loudly in my ears. I rounded a wide corner and saw a soft yellow glow coming from a small wooden desk in the middle of the corridor. A young woman in a plain blue dress was sitting quietly on an old chair, with her back turned to me. The sight of another human brought a sudden wave of hope, so I quickened my pace to ask her for help. My heavy footsteps echoed loudly against the flat walls, but the woman didn't move an inch or turn around to look at me. The air around the desk felt uneasily thick and scary, carrying a strange scent of old paper mixed with cold metallic dust. I stopped a few feet away, watching her dark hair hang motionless over her shoulders while the desk lamp flickered with a faint buzzing sound. "Hey, please help me. I need to get out of here." The woman slowly rotated her body toward me, but she didn't have a normal human face under her dark hair. Where her eyes and nose should have been, there was just a massive black hole lined with sharp yellow teeth snapping together. The creature let out a deafening screech, leaping out of the chair directly toward my chest. The creature slammed into me with incredible force, throwing my body backward onto the hard concrete floor with a sickening thud. I put both of my hands up to block its face, pressing my palms against its leathery skin while its jaws snapped, inches from my nose. Its sharp claws dug deep into my shoulders, tearing through my shirt and leaving deep, bloody scratches on my skin. "Get off me!" I screamed at the top of my lungs, using every ounce of power left in my body to shove its head away. I managed to plant one foot against the desk and shoved backward, causing us both to tumble across the slick floor. The monster lunged forward again with its massive mouth wide open to swallow my head, but a blinding white light suddenly flashed in front of my eyes. My eyes snapped open, and I found myself staring up at the familiar ceiling fan of my own bedroom. My body was drenched in cold sweat, and my heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked down at my hands and shoulders, relieved to find that my skin was completely unbroken and free of any bloody scratches. I let out a huge sigh of relief, trying to tell myself that the whole experience was just a terrible medication-induced nightmare. But when my dog Benny walked into the room, he stood near the door with his head down, growling quietly and backing away from me in fear. I walked into the kitchen, only to find that the family photos on the fridge showed my parents standing next to a tall stranger I had never seen before in my life. I dragged my fingers across the cold surface of the kitchen counter, trying to ground myself while staring at the unfamiliar face in those old family pictures. Every small detail in my home felt completely wrong, making me feel like an absolute intruder in a life that belonged to someone else. I didn't understand what was happening to me. I walked down to the street, but my usual bus stop was moved a block further down the road and driven by a total stranger. My mom even called me to say she couldn't eat the meal I made because of a severe almond allergy she never had before. Since that day, some things have changed in my life. However, it's still my life, my family. I don't know what caused that nightmare for me, but it has had consequences that last to this day.
This is a strange story. I brought Maya to the local play center for a birthday party. The room was packed with frantic children screaming inside the giant multi-level maze, while their parents sat at nearby tables, staring into their phones to block out the noise. Everything got really confusing when I called Maya to say we were leaving. She turned around and crawled into a long yellow tunnel. I let out a sigh, kicked off my shoes, and stepped onto the sticky floor mats to go get her. I hauled myself up the ladder, forcing my adult frame into a space meant for small children. I could still hear the muffled roar of the arcade games down below. I called out to Maya again, but I received no answer, so I kept crawling deeper into the maze. I reached a small junction where the yellow tube split into 3 different directions. I leaned forward to peek down the left tube, but the tunnel was completely dark and empty. The frantic sounds of screaming kids behind me suddenly started to drop in volume, almost as if someone was turning down a dial. I crawled straight into the center tube, dragging my heavy purse along the plastic floor behind me. The walls here were solid orange plastic, meaning I could no longer see any light from the main room. The background noise from the birthday party stopped dead, and the music, screaming children, and arcade beeps vanished into absolute silence. I stopped moving on all fours and pressed my ear flat against the cold orange wall to listen. There was nothing to hear except my own fast breathing rattling in my throat. The air smelled completely different now, like wet cardboard, mold, and stagnant water that had been sealed in a basement for decades. I turned around to go back, but the junction I'd passed was gone, replaced by an endless orange tube stretching into pitch darkness. I frantically pulled myself forward until the tube finally opened up into a larger space. I stepped out and landed on a filthy carpet that was soaked with dirty, ice-cold water. The room was massive, lit by flickering fluorescent lights mounted on a low ceiling, with faded yellow wallpaper peeling off every wall. The children's play structure had vanished completely. I walked down a long, narrow corridor with 7 identical metal doors lining the right wall, each missing a handle. The corridor took a sharp left turn, leading into a second room that looked identical to the first, without any windows or exit signs anywhere. I stopped right in front of a wide archway that opened into a dark room. I tried to step backward, but my heel caught on a tear in the carpet and sent me crashing onto my side. My shoulder slammed into the hard concrete, sending a sharp shock of pain into my neck. Suddenly, I heard a strange crackling sound coming from right above my face. An irregular crack appeared in the white ceiling panel, and a swarm of cockroaches fell onto my face. I slapped my face in a wild panic. I scrambled backward on my back, but my slick hands kept slipping on the wet carpet. The insects rained down in a heavy shower, landing on my arms, legs, and tangled hair, while their prickly feet scratched my skin. I rolled onto my stomach, frantically slapping at my body while screaming at the top of my lungs. They were crawling across my forehead, over my eyelids, and into my mouth. My hands were slick with crushed shells, but no matter how many I killed, more kept swarming up my legs. A pair of rough, filthy hands grabbed me by the shoulders from behind and yanked me backward across the floor. The stranger dragged me through a low metal hatch into a cramped concrete bunker underneath the floor. He kicked the heavy hatch shut and jammed a rusted iron bar through the handles to lock us in. He immediately began hitting my clothes with his bare hands, knocking the remaining insects off my back and stomping them into the ground. I collapsed against the cold concrete wall, gasping for air while my chest heaved with terror. The man was thin, wearing a heavy winter coat held together by layers of gray duct tape. His long beard was matted with grease, and his eyes darted around like a cornered animal. "Who are you? Where's my daughter?" The man ignored my questions, dropping onto an upside-down plastic bucket in the corner. His hands were gripping his knees so hard that his knuckles were stark white. "What is this place? How do I get back to the playground?" "There is no playground. There is no way back out there. My daughter is still out in those yellow tubes, so I have to go get her right now." "She is not in the tubes. Nobody is in the tubes anymore. You fall into this place and you stay here until you die. How long have you been stuck down here?" He stopped moving and slowly raised his head to look at me, but his eyes were completely hollow. "You stop counting the days when the lights never turn off." A sudden, terrifying bang echoed from the corridor above our bunker, making both of us jump. It was the sharp crack of a gunshot, followed by another shot 3 seconds later that sounded much closer. Heavy boots were pounding across the wet carpet outside, accompanied by frantic panting. The homeless man leaped off his bucket, his face turning paper white as he pointed toward a narrow steel pipe at the back that disappeared into a dark wall cavity. "Get inside that pipe right now. What is going on out there? Who is shooting? Move your legs, or you are going to die in this room." A loud volley of gunfire blasted directly outside the hatch, sending hot sparks flying off the iron bar. The man grabbed my shirt and threw me toward the pipe with all his strength. "Go now. I am staying here. Run as fast as you can, and do not stop for anything." I pulled myself up into the narrow steel pipe, scraping my elbows on the rough metal edges. Another burst of bullets punched straight through the hatch, filling the air with the smell of burnt gunpowder. I did not look back as I crawled out the other side into a maze of endless yellow hallways. I ran blindly through the corridors, my heart hammering in my throat while my wet socks slipped on the carpet. I rounded without looking, and my forehead smashed into the corner of a heavy steel support beam with a sickening thud, and my vision instantly failed. A sharp pain in my forehead dragged me back to consciousness, forcing my eyes open to bright lights. The yellow wallpaper was gone, replaced by the familiar padded walls of the playground. I was lying flat on my back on a blue foam mat, surrounded by the smell of hot popcorn and clean plastic. A teenager in a red staff uniform was kneeling over me, pressing a cool paper towel against my head. 3 other parents were standing around us, staring down at me with worried expressions. The chaotic noise of screaming kids and arcade games filled my ears once again. "Ma'am, please try to stay still because you took a really terrible fall coming down the slide." I sat up way too fast, grabbing my head as a sharp wave of nausea hit me. My fingers came away covered in a streak of fresh blood from a bad cut near my hairline. "Where is Maya? Where is my daughter? Mom, I'm right here. Why are you lying on the ground?" Maya was standing right next to the employee, holding a slushie and looking at me with total confusion. I reached out and pulled her into a tight hug, holding her so hard that she let out a complaint. I looked around the room in a frantic blur, scanning the parents and the exit doors, but everything was completely normal. I took Maya home that afternoon and never set foot inside another play center again. I spent months trying to process what had happened in those tunnels, but I could not find a single logical explanation for the water, the bugs, or the bunker. 2 months later, I was scrolling through a local news page on my phone while sitting on my living room couch. An old missing persons article from 6 years ago popped up in a thread about strange local cold cases. clicked on the link, and my blood ran completely cold the second the page loaded. The headline featured a photograph of a smiling man in his mid-40s with short dark hair and clear eyes. It was the exact same man from the concrete bunker, featuring the same jawline, even without the dirty beard and coat. According to the police report, he had walked into that exact play center 6 years ago to fetch a lost shoe and vanished without a trace. The police had searched every square inch of the building, but they never found a single clue. As far as the authorities were concerned, he had simply stepped into the children's play maze and ceased to exist in our world.